Lucifer is remembered as the ultimate rebel, the son who defied his father, rejected heaven, and chose chaos over control. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Lucifer was never truly rebelling, because rebellion requires choice, and Lucifer never had one. From the moment he fell, his identity was decided for him, punished without explanation, defined by a role instead of a reason. And everything we call defiance after that, the sarcasm, the indulgence, the rage, wasn't a rejection of God. It was a son screaming to be understood. Lucifer's conflict with his father doesn't begin with rebellion. It begins with creation. Lucifer was created as an angel with purpose, intelligence, and responsibility. He wasn't just powerful, he was trusted. He carried out God's will, enforced divine order, and believed he understood his role in the universe. But the problem was never obedience. The problem was silence. When Lucifer questioned his role, when he sought understanding rather than authority, he was met with nothing. No explanation, no reassurance, just expectation. Then came the fall. Lucifer wasn't exiled because he chose evil. He was cast out because he challenged the system without being given the language to understand it. He was sent to hell, not as a ruler by choice, but as a warden by assignment. Hell wasn't freedom. It was isolation. For thousands of years, Lucifer ruled a place designed for punishment, while being punished himself. He became the symbol of everything heaven rejected, not because he embraced it, but because it was forced onto him. And the worst part wasn't the exile. It was the absence. God didn't explain why. He didn't offer guidance. He didn't speak. So Lucifer did what people do when they're abandoned by authority. He filled the silence himself. He convinced himself his father was cool, that control mattered more than love, that obedience mattered more than understanding, that belief hardened into resentment, and resentment slowly turned into identity. Lucifer didn't just believe his father hated him. He believed he was disposable. And once you believe that, rebellion stops being a choice. It becomes survival. Being punished without explanation doesn't just hurt, it defines you. Lucifer wasn't just angry. He was confused, abandoned, and trapped in a system he didn't understand. For centuries, he enforced rules he didn't choose, while being punished for questioning them. He was powerful beyond imagination, but powerless in understanding. That contradiction became the core of his identity. Free will wasn't just a concept for Lucifer, it was an obsession. He needed to prove he could choose because, in reality, he never had. Every act of defiance, every indulgence, every sarcastic remark wasn't chaos for chaos's sake. It was a declaration, I exist on my own terms. Control became everything. If the universe could define him, he would define it first. If his father ignored him, he would take charge. If destiny dictated obedience, he would dictate action. And yet, even as he rebelled, his rebellion was tethered to the pain he felt. Every relationship he sabotaged, every flirtation with power, every reckless indulgence was an echo of being abandoned. Because when the one who should love you most refuses to explain, you learn to distrust everything else. Lucifer didn't hate God because of his power. He hated the absence of understanding, the denial of explanation, the feeling of being disposable, and that shaped every choice he would ever make. Not just against God, but against himself, his angels, and anyone who came close enough to challenge him. He wasn't the ultimate rebel because he was defiant. He was the ultimate rebel because he never had a choice, and yet he acted like he did. Therapy isn't a magic fix, but it's the first time Lucifer starts to see himself clearly. For centuries, he has been defined by roles, expectations, and punishment. He has been the devil, the ruler of hell, the rebel. But in therapy, he learns to strip all that away and look at himself, not as a symbol, but as a person. He sees his fear, his anger, his pain, and for the first time, he begins to understand who he really is beneath the mask. And then comes something even rarer, connection. Linda, his therapist, isn't just a professional. She becomes his first real human friend. For the first time in millennia, Lucifer experiences trust without judgment, guidance without control, understanding without punishment. She listens, she challenges, she supports. And in her, he finds a bond that isn't tied to his identity as a devil or his power as a celestial being. It's human. Friendship teaches him empathy, Reflection teaches him perspective, and slowly the walls he's built around himself begin to crumble. But to play devil's advocate, maybe Linda has no idea what she's doing. Maybe she's completely wrong. Maybe the world does revolve around Lucifer. Maybe his problems, his pain, his rage, his centuries of isolation are bigger than Hayes, bigger than anyone else's. Maybe he's the one who should define the rules, the one whose needs matter most. After all, he's lived longer, suffered more, and carries the weight of a universe on his shoulders. And if anyone is justified in seeing the world through their own lens, it's him. Lucifer's story isn't about surrender. It's about understanding. For centuries, he's defined himself in opposition to his father. Every act of defiance, every indulgence, every sarcastic remark, each was a reaction to God's absence, a shield against the feeling of being unworthy, unseen, and disposable. But as he begins to reflect, he sees that his rebellion, his rage, and even his charm are all responses, coping mechanisms to a life of abandonment and misunderstanding. Therapy and friendship teach him that he is more than a title, more than a role, more than the devil. He learns that his identity isn't defined by punishment or by being cast out, but by the choices he makes every day. And as he begins to see himself clearly, he starts to see God differently too. God is not simply a distant tyrant or cruel father. He is an eternal presence, constrained by omniscience and responsibility, carrying the weight of creation in a way that Lucifer could never fully grasp. God's silence isn't cruelty. It is a result of infinite perspective and the need to allow free will to exist. This is difficult for Lucifer to understand at first, because he experiences life through immediacy, pain, anger, betrayal, longing. God experiences it through eternity, consequence, structure, and purpose. And here's a twist. The very traits that make Lucifer feel abandoned are, in a way, reflections of God's own burden. God holds standards and expects obedience not because of control, but because of the stakes of creation itself. He wants balance, and the consequences of failure ripple across the cosmos. Lucifer, in his rage, mirrors his desire for structure. He seeks to control because he fears chaos. He judges because he feels pain when others disappoint. He lashes out because abandonment is a wound he can't ignore. As he begins to see this, a subtle transformation occurs. Lucifer doesn't stop being the devil. He doesn't stop indulging, charming, or challenging. But he begins to accept himself. Not as a broken angel, not as a rebel, not as a reflection of God's silence, but as a being capable of choice, of love, of responsibility. He begins to understand the paradox of his existence. He is both divine and flawed, immortal yet deeply human in his emotional needs, rebellious yet capable of loyalty and care. His father's psychology, the weight of responsibility, the necessity of order, the limits of understanding, intersects with his own. Lucifer sees that their conflict was never purely oppositional. It was relational, a dynamic of misunderstanding, miscommunication, and unspoken expectation stretching across eternity. And in that understanding lies power. He no longer seeks rebellion for rebellion's sake. He no longer defines himself solely against his father. Instead, he makes choices deliberately, with full awareness of consequence, responsibility, and his own desires. He carves his own path, respecting the role his father played in shaping him, but refusing to be trapped by it. Acceptance doesn't mean obedience. It means clarity. Lucifer sees his anger, his pain, and even his ego for what they are. He sees his father's burden, his intentions, and his limitations. And he integrates these insights into a life lived on his own terms. This is the moment of true rebellion, and it is almost paradoxical, because the ultimate rebellion is not defiance. It is understanding. It is embracing who you are, the history you carry, the bonds that shaped you, and still choosing your path, free from illusion, fear, or resentment. Lucifer becomes both the devil and himself. He understands his father, and in doing so, understands himself. He accepts responsibility, not because he must, but because he chooses, and in that choice lies his liberation. Lucifer's journey of understanding himself doesn't stop with therapy or friendship. It comes full circle with fatherhood. Raising his daughter forces him to confront what he never could before: responsibility without power, love without expectation, patience without control. Every decision matters. Every mistake shapes another life. For the first time, he isn't the eternal rebel or the devil defined by punishment. He's a father, and that role challenges him in ways that no war, no exile, and no therapy ever could. He struggles. He fails. He argues with himself, doubts his instincts, and fears becoming the kind of father he never had. Every misstep reflects centuries of pain, abandonment, and self-doubt. But through this struggle, his daughter teaches him the one lesson that had eluded him for millennia. You can't understand your purpose until you understand yourself. By trying to be a good father, Lucifer begins to see who he truly is. He isn't just a ruler of hell. He isn't just a devil. He is a being capable of guidance, of love, of insight. He sees that the chaos and indulgence, the sarcasm and defiance, were all shadows of his fear of being unseen, of being misunderstood. And now, through the lens of fatherhood, he recognizes a role he was meant to play. Hell isn't a prison. It isn't punishment. It's a responsibility, a domain where he can enforce justice, guide souls, and bring order without fear of being judged for the weight of eternity. And the work he does as a therapist, listening, understanding, helping others navigate their pain, is not a side gig. It's his calling. It's where his immortality, insight, and empathy intersect. He is not ruling hell, guiding mortals because he has to. He does it because it is who he is, because it aligns with the truths he has finally discovered about himself. His daughter mirrors this understanding back to him. Through her, he sees the impact of guidance, patience, and love. She reminds him that even the devil can nurture, protect, and teach. And in that reflection, Lucifer learns that rebellion and defiance were never the full story of his life. His purpose wasn't just to challenge or punish. It was to lead, to heal, and to choose consciously the legacy he would leave. Fatherhood doesn't erase his flaws. It doesn't erase his anger or his indulgence, but it tempers them. It transforms them into something productive, something meaningful, something human. And finally, Lucifer understands that his life, his choices, his roles, his failures, and his triumphs aren't defined by rebellion. They are defined by awareness, by responsibility, and by the conscious decisions he makes in every moment. Through his daughter, through hell, and through the work of understanding himself, Lucifer embraces a paradox. He is both devil and father, therapist and ruler, immortal and deeply human. He no longer needs to defy to exist. He exists because he chooses, and in that choice, he has finally found purpose. Lucifer was never truly rebelling. Every act of defiance, every indulgence, every sarcastic remark was a reaction, not a choice. He was shaped by absence, by expectation, by punishment. He fought against a world that never explained itself and against a father he misunderstood. But in understanding himself, in seeing the weight his father carried, in finding friendship, and in raising his daughter, Lucifer discovers a truth. Rebellion was never the goal. The goal was awareness. The goal was choice. The goal was accepting who he was and choosing who he wanted to be. He doesn't surrender. He doesn't obey blindly. He doesn't pretend to be perfect. He becomes himself. And in that, he finds freedom. Lucifer's greatest act of defiance is finally understanding.